Yo, 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 what's going on? What's going on? It's your boy Mike, and I'm back with a bit of a comparison between two cameras that I recently tried out. So I've been on the fence about switching from Sony for my photography needs over to Fuji, and I must admit, I've been seeing it all over YouTube, all over Instagram, all over Twitter, or X is what it's called now, and I kind of drank a little bit of the Kool-Aid, right? Like, I love my Sony, don't get me wrong. It is an absolute workhorse, but I have a Fuji X100F, right? And it's basically spoiled me with its straight out of camera workflow and the beautiful colors that are Fuji colors, right? So I would love to have that with Sony, but Sony's straight out of camera experience isn't the best. The colors aren't bad, but it's just that, you know, I wanted something a little better straight out of camera. I'm a bit lazy as I've gotten older with photography. I just kind of want to shoot and just hand them off, you know. I'm not shooting anything in studio often. Most of my stuff is usually candids or lifestyle things, or, you know, quick turnaround projects anyway. So it makes a little sense for me to switch to a system that I wouldn't have to edit as much, and I can take back that time and spend it with my family. So after months of putting the X-T5 into my Amazon or my B&H cart, it was just something that told me, nah, don't do it, you know. So I did the next best thing. I rented it for a week. And this is my comparison of the Fuji X-T5 compared to my Sony A7 IV. Now I based this comparison strictly on 5 things that are important to me. Now these things might not be important to you, but they're very important to me. Let's go. Okay, so straight up, the X-T5 is sexy as hell. I mean, you can't deny that. So my X100F is silver, and it's a good looking camera, right? But that X-T5 in all black, oh my God, oh my God. Yo, this thing looks absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. If I were to upgrade my X100F, definitely going black. Hands down. It is literally the sexiest camera I've ever seen in my entire life. Okay, so the Sony isn't a bad looking camera. It just looks like a camera, right? Mainly, it's got really hard edges. It looks very modern. It looks like what a camera should look like now. But the Fuji, man, woof, man, woof. The Fuji just makes the Sony look like the last girl left at the bar, man, at last call. You know, it's, the heart really matters. It's not always the exterior of a person. Sometimes it's about who they are as a person, right? So looks aside, the Sony has way better ergonomics, right? So the hand grip of the Sony is just hands down amazing. And with the Fuji, the hand grip is almost non-existent, right? I felt like I was gonna drop it all the time. Whereas when I have the Sony, man, I got a grip on that thing, man, and it's like, it ain't going nowhere. So I really enjoy the ergos of the Sony as a shooter, as a professional tool, more than I like the X-T5. So the X-T5 is a lot like my X100F. Also, Sony also wins on button layout, right? So Fuji, love y'all. Y'all do great things. But why is the playback button on the left side of the camera? Like, what's up with that? Like, who thought that would be a great idea? Why, you know, if I'm shooting here, right, with my right hand, just to look at the photos, I gotta go all the way across the camera to hit playback. And it's just became counterintuitive. It was just very weird. And I know you can probably map that button somewhere, but it's a rental, and I'm not doing all that for a rental. I do love the manual controls of the Fuji, but the way Sony implements its button layout is more thoughtful to me. The Sony is just a little easier to use with the button layouts. Now I could be biased because I've had my A7 IV since launch day, but I like the button layout on the Sony just a little bit better. Another thing that I didn't like about the button layout of the Fuji is the manual dials. Now they're really cool to look at, right? Like, awesome, totally dope to look at. But when you want to do hybrid shooting, this is where the problem lies, right? Let's say you're switching over from photos to video because you want to take a quick clip, right? So with the Fuji, you literally have to change everything, all the dials, man. You can't just switch into a different mode and then it's ready to go. If you want to do anything manually, you definitely have to change everything. On my Sony, it has a video dial, so I just go straight to that dial and my settings are already there. I don't have to do much of anything. It's already set up. Another thing that's really, really weird with the Fuji cameras is if you want to shoot in 24 frames a second, on the manual dials, there's no 1/50 shutter. It's only 1/60 and 1/30. So when you are shooting at 24 frames a second, like I'm shooting right now, what do you do? I literally have no clue. I have not found an answer on that, but I know it can shoot in 24, but not having that 1/50 on the dial is just a little confusing to me. Okay, so I'm not gonna hold you long, all right? We all know Fuji has amazing colors. Let's just get that out of the way right now. Fuji has amazing colors. No way around it. They probably got the best colors in the game. I didn't know how much colors really mattered because I've always shot Sony until I got my Fuji X100F. And that's when I noticed, like, wow, these colors are insane, man. Like, I get why people love their Fujis, man. Absolutely get it. Now, the Sony colors are not horrible. They ain't horrible. Now, don't quote me saying that Sony's got all these horrible colors, because they don't. It's just they're not Fuji level. And I think the difference is Sony makes colors that are super accurate, right? Like they're what you see is what you see in the world. Like it is that. And it's not that Sony doesn't have a look. It definitely has a look. It's more of a reality look, as opposed to Fuji, which has a kind of a filmic look where things aren't always what they seem, but they're rendered in a way that's really pleasing to the eye. A little more depth, a little more character, you know, to me. That's what I get from Fuji colors, and I don't feel like Sony colors give me an emotion a lot. I think when I edit Sony files, I can get that emotion, but straight out of the camera, I'm not getting that emotion other than this is perfect. Here you go. Also, Fuji has amazing greens. I don't know if anybody told y'all this, but the greens on Fuji, wow. With that being said, I do prefer to work with the Sony RAW files over the Fuji RAW files. It's just something about those Fuji files, like you can never just get it there. Like you can never get what you're getting straight out of camera in post on Fuji. And I've never been able to replicate that look, and I think it has to do with the Fuji sensors. But with Sony, I can do anything, like anything with those RAW files, and they come out amazing. And a lot of the times on my Sony RAW files, I'm going for a more filmic edit anyway, so it just works really well because of all the information and the dynamic range of the Sony. Whereas with the Fuji, I just feel like the RAW files kind of mess up after a minute. I don't know. It's just something about the Fuji RAWs that I don't particularly care for. Okay, so this is gonna sound wild, like wild as hell. I prefer the Sony menus over the Fuji menus, and I don't know why. I don't know why. Even on my X100F, I don't like those menus. I don't really go into them really anymore because I had it set up the way that I want it to be set up. But I don't know, man. It's just like a lot of things in their menu, and Sony has a lot of things in their menu system too, but it seems like it's a little more organized. Like it took me forever to find where eye autofocus was, like literally forever. Now I know it should be in the focus menu system, but it's like buried deep in there. And I don't know, maybe it's the monochrome thing, the black and white letters. I don't know. It's just something about their menu system that I just don't really care for. This is where things went haywire for me and Fuji. The shooting experience. All right, so, I'm gonna say this, and there are gonna be some upset people. It might be people that agree, but the Fuji autofocus system is not as good as the Sony autofocus system. It's not even close to being as good as the Sony autofocus system. Like, I've watched so many reviewers talk about this autofocus system as if it's great, you know, like it's the same as Sony, like it's as good as Sony, it's as good as Canon. And I don't know if maybe the camera I rented isn't good, but it's not as good as Sony at all. Like it's not terrible, but it's nowhere near as good. So that the autofocus was something that definitely concerned me, but it wasn't the biggest concern. The biggest concern is the buffer on the X-T5. And this is something I haven't heard any reviewer talk about at all, was the buffer. It is really bad, like really bad. And it was so frustrating and it was so devastating. So I booked 4 models to shoot that week that I rented the camera, and I ended up getting so frustrated with the Fuji that I just switched to the Sony, and I finished the shoots with the Sony, because you would take maybe about 10, 15, 20 images and then it would basically stop and it's writing to the card. And it just ended up making me lose time, and it messed up the flow of the shoot, you know. But I don't know if it's something internally or if it's the 40 megapixel files. You know, I'm not using a terrible SD card at all. I'm using the same SD card that I use in my A7 IV and in my Sony A7S3. And it has no problems with any of that. Like even the 4K files, 4K 120, anything like that. All the photo magic that I can throw at it. And these are uncompressed 33 megapixel raw Sony images, and the Sony has literally no issues with buffering. I don't know why any other reviewer hasn't spoken about the buffer issue. So I went down a deep dive to find out if this was really an issue, and it is. It's like totally an issue with this camera. So that in itself kind of told me, yo, the X-T5 is not the camera for me as far as something to replace my Sony as a workhorse camera. If I were to shoot anything sports related, I would not want to take this camera. I even tried it in burst mode with the 15 frames per second, and I got the 15 and then it slowed down. I mean, it was so consistent. Every shoot that I did, it was the same thing, and I ended up just switching over to the Sony instead and not having to experience that at all. Now, I've heard that the buffer is better on the XS20 and on the XH2, and I would actually like to try those because I feel like neither one of those has the manual dials, and I feel like those are better set up for hybrid things that I do. At the moment, currently, I'm staying Team Sony. I'm glad that I got to try the X-T5 before just buying it on a whim, which I've been prone to do sometimes. But I'm glad I did it this way and really put it through some paces and found the good and the bad with it. Do I think the X-T5 is a bad camera? Heck no. I think it's an amazing camera. It's just some things about it don't work for me, and those things might work for you. You know, if you aren't doing the things that I'm doing, then by all means go ahead and get it. And a lot of people love the X-T5. So this is just my opinion, and I'm nobody. I'm just a guy here on YouTube. So don't take my opinion as me being some subject matter expert, because I'm not. So peace and a bottle of hair grease. I'm out.